Neon synths, pastels. Miami Vice isn't just a show. It's a time capsule that instantly pulls us back into the 80s. But here's what most people don't realize. The show was also a launch pad for actors who were total unknowns at the time, then went on to become Hollywood legends. It is actually crazy how many members of the Hollywood Walk of Fame are on this list. Here are the stars who had one-off roles on Miami Vice before anyone knew their names. In 1984, Bruce Willis was nowhere near the action hero we think of today. He was a 29-year-old bartender from Penns Grove, New Jersey, pouring drinks at Cafe Central in Manhattan and dragging himself to auditions on almost no sleep. His resume was tiny. A couple of off-Broadway plays, a blink and you'll miss him appearance in The Verdict. He was talented, but he wasn't getting traction. Then came Miami Vice. During the show's first season, Willis landed the role of Tony Amato, a controlling, violent arms dealer who smuggles weapons through Miami while terrorizing his wife behind closed doors. The episode, No Exit, was directed by David Soul, and he clearly saw something in Willis. Instead of playing Amato as loud or unhinged, Willis went the opposite direction. Calm, cold, and precise. He carries himself with this unsettling, quiet confidence that makes him far more intimidating. Even in his early scenes, there's a focus to him that's hard to ignore. People on set noticed it too. Casting director Bonnie Timmerman later said Willis's audition was electric, the kind of moment where everyone in the room stops and goes, "Who is this guy?" Miami Vice was the first real glimpse of what Willis could do. Within a year, he booked Moonlighting, where his timing and charm made him a star. 3 years after that came Die Hard, and suddenly he wasn't just the bartender who lucked into a guest role. He was the new face of American action movies. At 70, Willis has stepped away from acting due to aphasia, but his legacy is undeniable, and Miami Vice was the first real sign of what he'd become. By the late 80s, Julia Roberts was still just trying to get noticed. She was 20, brand new to Hollywood, and bouncing between small auditions with nothing on her resume that suggested she'd become the biggest movie star of the next decade. She had the talent, she had the look, but the industry hadn't figured that out yet. Then she turned up on Miami Vice. Her appearance came during season 4 in an episode called Mirror Image. Roberts plays Polly Wheeler, a young woman tangled up in trouble she can't control. The part is small, but she brings a level of sincerity to it that feels surprisingly grounded for someone at the very beginning of their career. Most viewers at the time probably didn't think twice about it. She was just another young guest star passing through the show. But the timing is wild when you look back. Within months of that episode, Roberts landed Mystic Pizza, which instantly put her on Hollywood's radar. The following year brought Steel Magnolias and her first Oscar nomination. And then Pretty Woman arrived and changed everything, turning her into one of the defining actors of the 1990s. Julia Roberts didn't become an international superstar because of Miami Vice, but it was one of the first times a national audience saw her. When Benicio stepped onto the Miami Vice set in 1987, he was nothing like the brooding, magnetic screen presence he'd eventually become. He was in his early 20s, fresh out of NYU's Tisch School, sharing cramped apartments, working odd jobs, and chasing roles that barely covered groceries. His accent was thicker, his voice softer, and he was still figuring himself out as a person and as an actor. His appearance came near the end of season 3 in an episode called Everybody's in Showbiz. Del Toro played Pito, a young ex-con drawn into a ragtag theater troupe that moonlights as a heist crew. It's a strange mix of art and crime, the kind of offbeat storyline Miami Vice loved, and Pito is right at the center of the tension. The part is small, just a few scenes, and it wasn't written to spotlight anyone. It was the sort of gritty, one-off role dozens of up-and-coming actors cycled through on the show. It took almost a decade before that quality finally got noticed. He finally broke through with The Usual Suspects in 1995, stealing the movie in just a few scenes. 5 years later, Traffic earned him an Academy Award, and from there, he built a career on that same quiet menace. In the mid-'80s, Chris Rock was just a hungry kid from Brooklyn trying to get his first real break. He was working the New York comedy circuit. Tiny clubs like Catch a Rising Star, often in front of half-empty rooms where hecklers were louder than the laughs. He scraped by on tips, temp jobs, and stubborn ambition. He had no agent, no real acting credits, and no roadmap. Just raw timing, sharp instincts, and a voice that cut through the noise. So when Miami Vice came calling in 1987, even for a blink-and-you'll-miss-it role, it mattered. His appearance came in Season 4's Missing Hours, one of the strangest episodes the series ever produced. A trippy blend of crime drama, UFO panic, and psychedelic hallucination. Rock plays Carson, a records clerk obsessed with early computer bulletin boards and alien conspiracies, popping up in the middle of Trudy's surreal abduction storyline. It's a tiny part, just a few lines, but even in that small window, Rock stands out. He's fast, sharp, and funny. The same quick-witted presence he would later sharpen into one of the most influential comedic voices of his generation. A year later, Eddie Murphy spotted Rock at a New York club and helped land him a small part in Beverly Hills Cop 2, his first real movie break. Not long after that, SNL brought him into the cast, giving him a national platform and turning him from a club comic into a TV presence. And from there, his path only accelerated. In the mid-'80s, Viggo Mortensen was a young performer taking whatever roles he could get, bouncing between small film parts and TV guest spots, trying to build a career one day at a time. Miami Vice was one of those early steps. He appears in the Season 3 episode Red Tape, playing Eddie Trumbull, an undercover cop caught in a sting operation that spirals out of control. The role isn't large, but Mortensen brings a grounded, quietly intense energy to it, the kind of focus that makes you notice him even when the scene isn't about him. Most people watching in 1987 wouldn't have recognized his name, but the early signs were there. In the years that followed, Mortensen picked up momentum with films like The Indian Runner and G.I. Jane, and then came his defining moment, Aragorn, a role that turned him into an international star and opened the door to some of the best performances of his career in A History of Violence, Eastern Promises, and beyond. Looking back, his Miami Vice cameo feels like exactly what it was. A small but telling glimpse of an actor who was about to break out in a massive way. In the mid-'80s, Steve Buscemi was a former New York firefighter hustling from one tiny audition to the next, taking whatever roles he could find, student films, fringe theater, small TV parts, anything that kept him moving forward. Miami Vice was one of those early breaks. He shows up in the Season 3 episode El Viejo, playing Rickles, a jittery small-time crook caught up in someone else's mess. The role is quick, just a few scenes, but Buscemi brings that unmistakable nervous energy. The darting eyes, the twitchy tension, the sense that his character is always one bad choice away from disaster. A few years later, indie filmmakers started taking notice. His breakout came with Miller's Crossing and Barton Fink, followed by his iconic turn in Reservoir Dogs. By the mid-'90s, Buscemi had become the face of offbeat, unpredictable characters, and films like Fargo cemented his reputation as one of the greats. Looking back, his Miami Vice appearance is a fun piece of trivia, a brief glimpse of the unique presence he'd soon bring to some of the most memorable films of the era. Wesley Snipes had the talent, the physical presence, and the confidence, but in the mid-'80s, he was still looking for the role that would put him on the map. Miami Vice gave him one of his first. He appears in the Season 3 episode Streetwise, playing Silk, a smooth-talking hustler with equal parts charm and danger. It's not a large role, but Snipes brings a natural charisma that jumps off the screen. He moves with purpose, talks with rhythm, and has that early intensity that would later define his action career. A few years later, he'd break through with Major League, New Jack City, and then hit full superstar mode with Passenger 57 and Blade, becoming one of the biggest action stars of the 90s. Looking back, Vice shows the early form of what Snipes would become, sharp, magnetic, and impossible to ignore. Long before she was an award-winning actress, Annette Bening appeared on Miami Vice. In the Season 3 episode Red Tape, she plays Vicky, a woman caught in the fallout of a leak within the police department. It's a quiet role, but Bening makes it resonate. Listening closely, reacting with subtlety, and grounding the episode with a calm, natural realism. Within a few years, she'd become one of the most respected actors of her generation, earning multiple Oscar nominations and headlining major films. Her Vice appearance is small, but the talent was unmistakable. Kira Sedgwick had strong theater training and a natural emotional openness that set her apart early on. Miami Vice was one of her first steps. In Season 2's Phil the Shill, she plays Sarah MacPhail, a young woman pulled into a dangerous con. Sedgwick brings sincerity and vulnerability to the role, making Sarah feel more like a real person than a stock character. Even in her early 20s, she already had the emotional control that would later define her career. A few years later, she'd appear in Born on the 4th of July, Singles, and eventually become a household name with The Closer. Stanley Tucci had that unmistakable presence, calm, sharp, slightly dangerous, but was still unknown in the mid-'80s. One of his early TV appearances came on Miami Vice. In Season 2's Baby Blues, Tucci plays Stephen DeMarco, a nervous, conflicted adoptive father caught in a dangerous custody battle. It's a straightforward part, but Tucci elevates it with his trademark stillness and quiet tension. Even in his early 20s, he had a way of making every scene feel like it revolved around him. Over the next decades, he'd become one of the most respected character actors in film, earning critical acclaim across genres. His Vice cameo is quick, but unmistakably Tucci. Bill Paxton was doing anything he could to stay in the game in the mid-'80s, cutting hair on sets, taking tiny roles, and hoping for a break. Miami Vice was one of his early stops. In the Season 3 episode Streetwise, he plays Detective Vic Romano, a rogue Vice cop who's fallen in love with a prostitute and spirals into corruption and tragedy. Paxton is electric, twitchy, intense, unpredictable. Even in just a few scenes, he brings a sense of danger that feels totally real. Within a year, he'd become Private Hudson in Aliens, and from there, built one of the most versatile careers in Hollywood. His appearance on Vice is brief, but pure Paxton, raw, memorable, and bursting with energy. Liam Neeson had the size, the voice, and the presence, but not the visibility in the mid-'80s American market. Miami Vice gave him an early American showcase. He appears in the Season 3 premiere When Irish Eyes Are Crying, playing Sean Caroon, an IRA bomber torn between grief and duty. Neeson brings a weight and emotional gravity to the role that lifts the entire episode. Calm one moment, explosive the next, always believable. Just a few years later, Spielberg cast him as Oscar Schindler, and his career changed overnight. His Vice role may be early, but the Neeson intensity was already fully formed. Ed O'Neill had the timing, the toughness, and the grounded realism. He just needed opportunities. One came through Miami Vice. O'Neill appears in the Season 1 episode Heart of Darkness, playing Arthur Lawson, an undercover FBI agent who's gone too deep. It's a tense psychological story, and O'Neill plays the part with gritty exhaustion and quiet desperation. He looks like a man who hasn't slept in days, and that authenticity anchors the entire episode. A few years later, he'd land Married with Children, where he played the iconic Al Bundy. And a few decades later, he'd play the patriarch role once again on Modern Family. How many of these guest appearances did you remember? Let me know in the comments which one surprised you most. Thanks for diving into the neon with me. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more retro TV deep dives.